Okay, so good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, or good evening, or good day. So wherever you are right now, I hope that before you watch this video, you already have eaten your breakfast or your meal. You have your water beside you and your notebook for taking important notes. So according to our EDUC 61 nga syllabus, our first topic will be about 21st century assessment. So these are the different assessment tools that we will be going to use in our CBLM session plan or sa ato ang way sa klase pohon if mahimo na tang teachers. Di ba akong giingon nga your EDUC 91 and your EDUC 61 are connected with each other, and if wala man ako na under sa EDUC 91, well, diri sa atong EDUC 61, we will be making session plan and CBLM which are needed if and only if mag-TM pohon sa TESDA. So, for the objectives of this activity, at the end of this week, you will be able to use appropriate assessment tools and technique, relate learning outcomes and assessment, and of course, you will be able to discuss what are the different 21st century assessment characteristics. So, okay, for a while. Okay, so I hope you're ready right now. Let's start with our discussion. So for the introduction, of course, I have to introduce what is it all about, and such. Now, 21st century marked by the development of information, computers, automation, and communication, which penetrate human being in the world. So, of course, 21st century naman ta nabilong karon, and we are all aware of the fact that technology is continuously improving and continuously changing. So, na mga demands, na mga changes, development, and re-engineering sa mga systems around us, of course. And of course, ato silang gamitan ang mga 21st century nga mga techniques and assessment tools para effective na siya. Dili na tong traditional way of assessing. On the other hand, student skills to learn must be developed, and this is a very important thing nga dili ra kinahanglan cognitive ang ilang ma-learn sa classroom, but also they have to learn how to do this and that para ma-develop ang ilang skills. So they need to develop critical and creative thinking. So of course, it is necessary that students have to develop the higher order thinking skills, the critical and creative thinking, so that the result of the process or the things that they are doing every day is positive. So according to Greenstein last 2012, Schmoker last 2011, and Kajigal and Mantuano last 2014, educators need to focus on what to teach, how to teach, and how to assess it. So if we will be talking about what to teach, what are the things that we're going to teach sa ato ang mga students? And of course, how to teach it. So, saan man, in what way ni siya mahitabo inside the classroom. And of course, it is very important to assess the students' learning para mahibawan nato if na ay progress ang ato ang pag-teach sa ilaa. So now, let's move on to our next slide. We have here the characteristics of 21st century assessment. So what are the different characteristics of the 21st century assessment that we should keep in mind para magamit nato if we will be teachers someday? So I hope that you can see the slide right now. The following 8 characteristics of 21st century assessment are essential. What do you mean by essential? These are very important, especially in the preparation of assessment activities by us educators. So it is necessary to refer these characteristics to ensure that learners are being assessed. So it's very important that as educators, we should know the characteristics of 21st century assessment before ta maka gamaog ato ang kaugalingon nga assessment. So first is we have the responsive. So si responsive, for a while. Responsive, it is a set of processes for responding to assessments that are thoughtfully developed. So meaning visible performance based as a result of generates the data that inform curriculum and instruction. When you responsive, it is something like kung nakigibuhat na dayoy action. So dapat ang assessment na to sa 21st century, it is responsive to the curriculum and instruction. So dapat na connection sila because this incorporates best practices in feedback and formative assessment. So it is necessary for us, or it is easier for us to have the feedbacking kung ang ato ang assessment is connected sa ato ang curriculum and instruction. So that is being responsive. So, my teacher dire, in my literature 11 class, I discussed about literature and some literary works. For me to know if the class understood the lesson, I will conduct a formative assessment. In a 1/4 sheet of paper, the students will answer the question, how does literature mirrors your life? And what literary works that mirrors your life? So in order for her to know if naabay na sabutan ang iyang mga students, she has this, or she conducted this formative assessment nga connected sa iyang topic. So this is being responsive to what she is or what she was teaching to her students. So dapat connected ang atong activities. That is why necessary sa ato ang kabalo ta dapat mo connect sa atong activities sa ato ang topic para responsive ang ato ang assessment. Okay? Next is we have flexible. Kadaghan nato nakadungog aning word nga flexible. Assessment need to be adaptable to student setting. So dili lang kayang teachers dapat flexible, but also ang atong assessment nga gina conduct or administer inside our class or inside the classroom. So rather than the identical approach that works in the traditional assessment, ang ato ang 21st century approaches ang more versatile. So dapat ang atong assessment kabalo mo adapt sa student settings. So example, if the students inside your classroom are slow learners or fast learners, nakay kaugalingon nimo or nakay nahunaan na dapat na assessment tool or assessment technique para mas dali sila makasabot-tanan. Or if your students are some of them have disabilities, let's say for this situation, that some of your students have disabilities, so it would be more difficult for you to have the assessments. Of course, you have to think for an assessment that will adapt to the student situations and settings. Kung may settings, asa sila dapat tagapuyo, unsay lang ipuyan, unsay lang situations sa life, or unsay ang diagnosis as a student. No? So that is being flexible. Dili ra kay ang teachers dapat ang flexible, but also ang ato ang assessment ang flexible. Okay, na teacher dire. In my Principles of Teaching 1 class, I let my students have a survey on their multiple intelligences. After that, I grouped my students according to their intelligences and let them have a creative presentation. So this is a good example, no? In her Principles of Teaching class daw, ipa-identify niya sa mga students o asa sila best or tanaw nila asa sila nabilong ang multiple intelligences. After that, kung same sila multiple intelligence or intelligence, yato silang i-group and then kato sila nga mga groups ang gilet nga magkaroon or mag-arrive into creative presentation. And that creative presentation depends on the intelligences or intelligence these students have. Next is integrated. Okay, what is integrated? Integrated, from the word integrate. Now, assessments are to be incorporated into day-to-day practice rather than add-ons at the end of instructions or during a single specified week of the calendar. So assessments are to be incorporated day by day paman gani, di ba? Pero sa ato module by module or week by week, no? Or a week after the 2 weeks of discussion because we are still in the middle of pandemic. So blended learning, mo na to ang i-apply dili day by day. Pero face to face, ang discussion na to, kung magbita ng adlaw, after the discussion na ay assessment. So that can be considered as integrated. Ano gitawag siya integrated? I-integrate na to ang tong assessment sa atong discussions in between, no? And after our discussions so that nakita na to nga nabay na learn na ato mga students or wala. So that is for integrated. Next is what the teacher have said now about integrated. I assess my students from time to time because assessments are not just given at the end. No, I give my students formative assessments rather than just giving summative assessment. So nakadungog diba mo na summative assessment, right? So summative assessments are to be done after the topic in final exam or after the topic in midterm period is or have been discussed. So I have ko maghatag og summative exam. So what we are doing in the flexible learning is we are giving you activities from time to time because it is necessary for us to assess you, no, every now and then so that we will know if asa mo dapita weak and asa mo dapita naay strength. Next is informative. So say informative. See informative from the word inform, no? The assessments na tuang administered inside our discussion or inside our class, inside our classroom, the desired 21st century goals and objectives are clearly stated. So of course, it is necessary that the goals and objectives will be stated before every discussion so that you will know unsa inyong kinahanglan i-achieve. And of course, dapat detailed ang gina-teach sa inyo so that it will be easier for you to emerge your knowledge or the knowledge that you can get and the skills nga inyo ang pwede nga ma-improve. That is assessment as being informative. Okay? Next is we have the statement of the teacher. Before I start my class, I see to it that my students are aware of the goals and objectives. So with that, my students will be guided with their achievements. So as you can observe kanina, I have mentioned the objectives that kinahanglan ninyo i-attain, i-achieve after adding ato ang discussion. So it is very necessary to be like that. Like ato silang kanang tagaan sa what they call this, ato silang tagaan-daan sa mga objectives, no, or mga goals nga dapat nila ma-achieve in our class. Next is we have multiple methods. Kung nasa multiple methods. Pamitang multiple methods, it is an assessment continuum that includes spectrum of strategies. So multiple methods, daghantag methods na gamiton. So it depends on the student's knowledge and skills. And of course, we are giving relevant tasks. What I mean by relevant tasks, these are important tasks, projects and performances nga gi-emphasize through authentic and performance-based assessment. Kung may authentic, these are real-life assessment and of course, performance-based. So, we are talking about the performance, no? Di lang kay magamit ang ilang critical thinking skills, ang ilang thinking, cognitive, but also we are involving the psychomotor, performance-based. So there is recognition of an appreciation for the processes and products of learning. So kinahanglan nga daghan ta gamiton nga methods sa atong students because lahi-lahi ang ato ang students. Okay, so according to her, my students have different intelligences, so I see to it that I don't focus only one way of assessing their learnings. Instead, guys, we should focus on different ways of assessing the learning of the students. Next is communicated. Kung sa'yo na sa communicated, communication of assessment data is clear and transparent for all the stakeholders in our school. So if the assessment is properly communicated, the results are routinely posted to a database and of course, available siya and comprehensive sa tanang levels, it would be easier for the students to receive routine feedback on progress. So mas paayo natin gitawag communicated assessment because mahibawaan sa students asa sila kinahanglan mag-improve, asa sila strong, and of course, parents are kept informed through access to visible progress reports. So this is connected to databases, like for example, natay step. If and only if parents are included in the use step, they will be able to know if naamoy progress or wala. So, muna gitawag og communicated. So, communication of assessment is very important. So, kung wala tayo database, teachers have to tell the parents ngayon ang ilang anak sa eskwelahan. Next is we have this one statement from teacher. I let my students keep track on their progress by returning their papers or evaluation sheet. I also see to it that I submit my students' grade on time for their parents to be aware of their children's achievement. Now, it is easier for us to do this if the students are keeping on track also of their progress, are keeping on track also of the activities nga kinahanglan nila i-take sulod sa among klase. Okay yung taong tanan kung ang student responsible inside the classroom, iyang i-take note ug unsa tong mga activities nga yan ang na-take or wala, so that the teacher will be saved from headache because he or she is handling multiple students in one time. So guys, as students, you should be more responsible of your activities nga wala ninyo na-taken, tapos i-inform niyo ang inyong teacher so that the teacher will also track your progress and will return the papers or evaluation sheet kung kinahanglan niya i-return kung naaman gani. And of course, gradings, no, makasubmit man gid mi unta sa mga grado on time if walay mga students nga mga labad. So kung nay mga students nga gisigirag unya-unya, no, for example sa midterm pagani, dili mo sulod sa imong klase tapos tingpas og grado ay pamangutan na unsa yang kulang, it is a problem and it is a waste of time for the teachers, no, kung ikaw ra ang sundon, kung ikaw ra or sa imo ara siya mag-adjust. It is very unfair for the students who are doing their best tapos ikaw gapayahe ra ka dira galaglaag ra ba ka dira tapos ikalimtan ni mga lessons dayon inigtig pa sa grado, grabe kay kakaapurado nga mangutan na sa imong teacher kung sa imong kulang. So mas maayo nga midterm paningkamot kay unsa ra bay imo ang grado sa midterm. For example, dili ka gasulod sa klase, dayon naka-exam ka, yes, naka-exam ka pero wala po kay PIT. Your grade is only 4.50. Unsay grado dira sa imong midterm mo na imong i-fill out dito sa prisms. And we can do nothing about it because it is the command from our bosses. So, kamo dapat as students dapat responsible pud mo. Next is technically sound. The 21st century assessment should be technically sound because students demonstrate what they know and how they can apply that knowledge in ways that are relevant and appropriate for them. So adjustments and accommodations are made in the assessment process to meet the students' need and fairness. So dapat, it is right, it is okay, everything's going well because several adjustments will be needed kung kinahanglan nga ma-meet sa student ang fairness, no? And of course, we are all aware of the fact that students demonstrate what they know, how they can apply that knowledge in ways. So dapat atong gigama nga assessment atong basahon daan, no? Basahon na to daan if correct ba nato mga ipanggama, wala na ba siya sayop. And the last thing is, as a teacher, itry og buhat ang imong assessment nga gigama para makahuna ka or makatry ka sa position of the students kung sila nasa imo ang kuan or kung ikaw nasa ila ang position. Okay, according to my teacher, I make sure that my assessments are valid, reliable, and supports comparisons since my students have different intelligences, belief, gender, and socio-economic groups. So according to her, ang iyang assessment should be valid. Mabito na natin gitawag nga validity, reliability, so that it would be easier for us to identify if our assessments are that reliable, dili ra ba kay siya lisod or dili ra ba kay siya sayon, valid if the questions are valid, and of course, it will help you cater your different intelligences. Next is systemic. So sa gitawag systemic, I think this is our last one. Last characteristic of 21st century assessment, gitawag na tawag systemic. 21st century assessment class is part of a comprehensive and well-aligned assessment system that is balanced and inclusive of all students. From the word system, ang 21st century assessment, these are being recorded and na-apply na siya sa assessment system sa tanang levels sa education. Panalitan mo yung tawag elementary, high school, or secondary and tertiary. The assessments there are all comprehensive and well-aligned sa assessment system. Now, dili pwede nga magama-gama ni ang mga assessment dira para sa inyo ha. But of course, we are taking into concern that the assessments that we're giving are still aligned to the assessment system. Like for example, na mga role play, na mga groupings, etc. So they are all aligned sa ato ang system. Changes are inevitable, so I make sure that I am able to identify the needs of my students and the community. With that, I will be able to develop my students into globally competitive individuals, and we have this different mission sa ato ang school nga dapat maka-produce taog competitive individuals. So changes are inevitable. The teachers are making sure that they are able to identify the needs of their students and the community. So dapat maka-produce taog competent individuals someday. So next is For our activity 1, I will just post it in our group, no? So that it would be sa inyo ha na magkuantaan ni nga activity. So I will just flash in the screen kung unsa ni siya nga kana activity. So I hope that makita niyo siya. Okay. I have just zoomed in. No. For your activity 1, given the following school situation, how would you apply the 21st century assessment characteristics? So use the template provided, template provided sa OPOS, but ang scenario is, before the school year starts, Ms. Garcia, the principal, called the teachers to a meeting and discussed the plans for the coming school year. One of the agenda of the meeting is the improvement of the tools and methods that the teachers utilize to assess students' learning. As per record, the school utilizes traditional assessment practices. She challenged the teachers to present an updated assessment instrument or tool that is aligned with the required skills of the 21st century. So use the provided ang inyong timan-an, evaluate your answers based on the characteristics of the 21st century assessment. So, inyo answer 3 is i-base niyo sa aton na mention nga 21st century assessment. And of course, we'll be using this template. So, assessment instrument tools currently used. So, for example, naman tayo scenario 3. Na kuno kita sa school, si Miss Garcia ang principal, tapos i-call niya ang teachers, tapos ang agenda is to improve the tools and methods. As per record, ang ilang gigamit kay traditional assessment practices. So gi-challenge niya ang mga teachers to present an updated instrument tool. So para sa inyo ha, you can search your answer here. The instrument tools that are going to be used in the 21st century, the instrument or tools rather, nga ginagamit or gina-require sa 21st century. Tapos, you will write here ug unsay purpose ato niya nga instrument or tool, and kapila na siya gamiton, how often, every now and then baka or minsan lang ba, so that I know if kanang diri pa lang daan na mo'y idea sa instrument or tools, and then you should base your answer, like for example, you should see to it that the instrument or tools here that you are using or you are putting are under or pwede siya mabilong sa characteristics. Like for example, kani akong gibutan during instrument tools nga ako na search kay responsive ba ni siya, pero dili na nimo kinahanglan butangan if responsive or flexible ba siya. And butangan nimo unsay purpose ani niya instrument tools, at least 10 instruments or tools. Okay, so that's it. Let's continue to our let's continue discussing our topic for this day. So let's have this for our next slide. We're talking now about the instructional decision in assessment. The instructional decision in assessment. So what's the instructional decision in assessment? By the way, kanina, we are talking about the characteristics ha. For a while. Okay, kanina, we're talking about the different characteristics of the 21st century assessment. That is the number 1. And now we will be talking about the instructional decision in assessment. So unsay nasa instructional decision in assessment? This is the major objective of educational assessment. and is to have a holistic appraisal of a learner, his or her environment, and accomplishments. So the educational assessment class process starts in analyzing the criterion together with the teaching learning situation, after which the kind of evidence are appropriate. So we are talking about what are the things to do in instructional decision in assessment. So let's move on here. It's a bit small for you to see, I think. Okay, let me just. Okay. So, as you can see on the screen, assessment can be used as a basis for decision making. So we're now talking about assessment in decision making. So saan natin paggamit ang assessment sa decision making inside our classroom? So first, we have the phases, no? Actually, these are parang 3 phases yata ni siya. Before starting teaching, we have the decision to be made. So unsay atong decision to be made before teaching? Dapat makauna na natawag content to cover during the following day, week, month, grading period, and so on. That's why we have the daily lesson log, the lesson plans, the syllabus, the curriculum guide, kana sila. Those are the things that we should consider or we should remember para makabalutaw unsay atong angay nga decisions buhaton. Anang adlaw, anang sunod semana, sunod bulan, or anang grading period. So abilities of students considering the cultural background, interests, and skills of students in planning the teaching activities. Guys, remember kung gumagama tag teaching activities, naka-base na siya. Naka-base na siya sa atong pag-adjust sa cultural background sa students, sa interest sa students, o sa skills. Kay if ever nag-contradict silang cultural background, wala sila ma-learn or dili sila ganahan mo learn or dili sila ganahan maminaw or mabagsak sila sa imong klase. Interest, it is very important that we should consider first the interest, skills, and needs of our students para makabalota ug unsay atong tools nga gamiton sa pag-assess sa ilaha. Okay? So sa materials, appropriate to use with students. So dapat ang atong materials nga ginagamit sa pag-assess atong mga students, these are appropriate for their age, for their grade, for their interest, or whatsoever. So, muna siya atong kinahanglan pang timan ano. Next is learning activities that will engage both the teacher and students as the lesson is being taught. So we have to be reminded that before we have our class, we should know first, or we should be able to identify what are the different learning activities that will engage both sa atua o sa ato ang mga students as the topic is being taught to them. Okay? So next is learning targets that the teacher wants to achieve. So what are the learning targets? What are the goals? What are the objectives? Dapat nakauna na taan para ato ang mag-guide atong students ug unsa kinahanglan nila ma-achieve and ma-attain after sa ato ang klase. Organization and arrangement of students in class is very important because it will help them to have the conducive learning inside the classroom. So dapat kabalo na ka sa arrangement sa mga students, like kanang mga tabian itapad sa mga hilumon or kanang mga tag-as ug height iputan nimo sa likod para masayon sa imuha o conduct sa imuhang assessment. What are the possible sources of information? So, informal observation of students during class. Now, during class, maka-observe pangid ka sa mga students during class, like, unsay ilang ginabuhat sa imong klase, and mabantayan nimo ay kani sila nga mga students ganahan o ingani. So it's better for me siguro to have this assessment conducted dili niya ako ang ginabuhat karon. Another is conversation with students, previous teachers. Now, it is necessary na dapat sa mga amigo pod ka sa mga teachers aning imong previous students so that it would be easier for you to know what kind of students are you dealing with. Scholastic aptitude test results. So these are the pre-tests, the different test results or testing inside your class or done by your school para makabalo ka og asa sila weak or strong. Students' past grades and standardized test results. And of course, knowledge of students' personal family circumstances. So these are the things nga pwede mahimong rason or mahimong factor para sa ato ang pag-decide ug unsa nga assessment ang atong gamiton sa ato ang klase. So yes, next is during teaching. So during teaching, muna kinahanglan nato nga i-keep in mind, no? So decision to be made pa lang, students learning on what and how the lesson is presented. So diri, makabalo na pud ka if ang mga students way, no, of learning if how and what the lesson is presented and the improvement needed to work better. So there are things na we are malimtan na to sahay nga there are still improvements pa sa atong mga students and sa atong assessment nga ginabuhat, diba? What feedback to give each student about how well the student is learning. So diri sa during teaching, makaunaw na nakaw kung sa yung possible feedback na ihatag sa mga students o how well they are learning inside your class. So mabito na natag ito taking down notes of the feedbacks para feedbacking after teaching necessary for you or easier for you to identify it. Readiness of the students to move to the next activity. So makita nimo sa during teaching nga ready na yung mga students sa next activity or not. Okay, nga na siya. Next is sources of information. Necessary nga sa during teaching, mahibawan na to ang mga sources of information. First, observation of students during learning activities. So na kay ma-achieve or ma-attain nga information during the observation sa klase, during sa klase sa mga students. Students' response to questions, no? According to sa first class nimo, it is where or it is how they answer your questions. So, basin dili na kani akong ipa-activity puhon kay marag di ko satisfy sa ilang pag-answer sa question. Mangita ko lang yung activity nga makita na ko nga na-joy learning akong students. Next is observation of students' interaction. Makita nimo if they are being interested sa imong klase. And of course, mangita ka activity nga mas active ang mga students. Next, diagnosis of the types of errors the students made. No? Unsa tong mga types of errors, major errors ba ito sila or minor, so it will help you to rethink of another assessment nga buhaton. Looking for alternative ways to teach the materials, identify if there are students who are not participating and acting appropriately. So necessary nga hibawaan nato, no? Very important nga hibawaan nato if they are acting appropriately inside your class or not. After na ta, okay? After. So timan decisions to be made, no? Sa after. How will the students achieve the short and long-term instructional targets? So makaya ba sa mga students if short targets or long-term targets like sa atong objectives and goals? Kita na to diri og unsa na sad ang atong buhaton nga assessment. Next, strengths and weaknesses to be given as feedback to parents or guardians of students. So katong mga strengths and weaknesses ay kani siyang bata ma'am kay kwan siya sa akong klase, very good siya sa akong klase, pero nalang siya isa ka thing nga weakness niya. So pwede na to na siya ma-feedback sa parents. Grade to be given to each student for the lesson unit at the end of the course. So yes, very understandable. If kanang after the class we will be able to know unsay ato ang grade nga ihatag sa ilaha. And sources. Asa ta pwede makakuha og sources sa ato ang assessment. First, sa classroom tests, sa projects and observations, sa ato ang pagchika-chika sa atong students, pag-interview sa ilaha, sa mga standardized test results, for example, kanang national achievement tests, division achievement tests, or yes, sa school nga gihatag, observation of students' classroom participation, kanang standing performance, sa assignments, sa projects, and all. Review each student's homework results, and of course, sa ilaang test results, scholastic aptitude. So sa before, during, and after these sources of information and these decisions to be made are very relevant, are very crucial as teachers na atoa siyang mahibaw-an, ang atoa siyang matiman-an para magkaroon or magka-provide ta assessment nga very interesting, very maka-trigger or maka-activate sa ilaang pagka-active students. So these are the kanang things nga kinahanglan nato i-remember. So concentration na ni sila, and those I have mentioned kanina are the most common nga things dapat nato maobserbaran inside the classroom. So now we have the assessment in classroom instruction. So this is according to, or these are according to the categories and purposes of each category by Lean and Gronland last 2000. First and foremost, category. These are the 4 major types of assessment nga ang students gakalibog paghapon karon as well as the teachers. So the first category, we have the placement assessment. Si placement assessment, this is an assessment that measures the entry behavior. So before sa imong klase, you have to see to it, you have to try to know if unsa ni siya nga type sa akong students, if mahimo siya akong student from this semester until mahuman ni siya nga semester. So that is the purpose. It measures the entry behavior. Whereas, ang formative assessment, it is to monitor if na by progress sa learning ang isa ka student. Like for example, after sa module na ako'y pa-activity, na ako'y pa-quiz, that can be considered as formative assessment. Next is diagnostic, from the word diagnose. No? Diagnostic assessment, we have to identify the different causes of learning problems. So if ma-identify na to ang causes, learning problems of a student, it is the time for us to think of another assessment tool para ato ang makater to siya nga learning problems and ato siyang ma-solve. Meanwhile, si summative assessment, after, mura siyang summary bitaw, after na siya sa tantanan-tanan. Like for example, hapit na ang midterm exam. So magpa-summative assessment ko from topic 1 to the last topic of the midterm period because it measures the end of course achievement. So na ba kayo na-learn from our first topic until our last topic, that can be considered as end of course achievement. Diba? So those are the differences, main differences of the 4 categories of assessment. We have the placement assessment, entry behavior, measures. Conformative, monitors learning progress. Diagnostic assessment, identify causes of learning problems. Summative assessment, we are talking about it measures and of course achievement of the student. Okay, So we have now the types of educational decision. These are still important para makahelp sa to arrive into a decision ug makabalata unsa din nga decision ng ako ang ginabuhat inside my class. Okay, first is instructional decision. Unsay nasa instructional? This decision is normally made by individual classroom teacher. Individual classroom teacher. So, ikaw teacher sulod sa classroom, it is up to you of what instructional decisions you will be giving sa mga instructions sa mga students because it is necessary to meet the targets or objectives nga mo siyang giset sa imo ang classroom discussion. Decisions are reached according to the results of tests administered to the class. So, dira ni may bawaan unsa toy mga possible nga instructions sa mga students. Okay, so example daw. After a test was given by the teacher, the result is not so satisfactory. Thus, the teacher may decide to reteach the lesson using different strategy. Now, it is very important, di ba makabantay mo yung teachers pangutana sa inyo ha. Okay, class, wala na may questions. Kaya magpa-quiz na ko. Aron walay ka na magsig pangutana. Okay, walay ka question, walay nangutana nga student. After sa quiz ni teacher, nakita niya only 40% of the student got the correct answers. So, what do you think will the teacher feel? Makuan siya, ay, dili pa dito enough akong pag-teach. But I am aware that my students are different. No, they have their learning differences and basin slow learners ning uban ni. So kinahanglan ako i-reteach siguro ni siya nga topic pero lahi na nga strategy ako ang gamiton para ma-meet nila ang objectives nga ako ang gi-set from the first. That is why individual teacher kay ikaw magbuot og unsa nga decision ang imong buhaton, unsa nga instructions ang imong ihatag. That can be called as, or that is called as instructional decision. Next is grading. Not grading, from the word grade. It is usually based on teacher-made tests. So these are tests na ginabuhat sa teachers, and teachers are assigning grades aning a certain quiz or assessment tool. For example, aning activity that na voice, 10%, performance, content, tapos ang total kay mo ni siya. So that can be considered as grading. Grades are assigned to the students using one of the assessment factors. So na criteria, na rubrics na gibasihan, tapos na mga scores or grades sa kilid so that it would be easier for them to grade the student. So our quarterly grade is based on the following. Example na siya, results sa teacher-made test, class participation, projects, and attendance. Another example is here sa USTP. We have the class standing performance students, for the quizzes, the seat works, the exams, and the projects. So after that, na ma-generate nga grado, that can be considered as grading. Next is diagnostic. Diagnostic is made to determine a student's strengths and weaknesses and the reasons nga nung ing-ana siya sa imong klase. So the diagnostic test example is when a teacher gave an essay test, true or false test, sa panatira, the teacher noticed that the students were able to write more than 5 grammatically correct sentences, but the coherence of the ideas contained in the paragraph is poor. Nakagama lagi ang students o perfect kayo nga sentences, 5 ka sentences, correct ang grammar, pero ang iyaang words gatoy-tuyok ra. So the result shows that the students still need more help in understanding the principles of writing a good paragraph. Parehas na siya sa kanang luto-luto na dere sa ato ang cookery or sa ato ang bread and pastry production, sa ato ang pag-bake or sa atong food processing. The teacher is giving you an activity after the lesson, like for example gipagama ba mo og batter, and then he or she observed that nice kayo ang kuan, nice kayo ang yung presentation, but when he or she touches or touch the batter, it is different from what is in the instruction should be. So, ang iyang next nga buhaton is kuan, pasabton pa mo sa ways, sa things to be considered in making a batter. So that is, or those are the first three nga description or decisions nga tungbuhatan sa education. Educational decision, we have the instructional, made by the teacher. Grading, it is also made by the teacher, pero mga made test siya. And diagnostic, again, to diagnose, to see if where are your weaknesses and your strengths. Next is we have the selection. Kaning selection, we have the selection committee, na ay mga tao nga mo select. For example, description and selection, it involves an accepting or rejecting the examinee based on the results of assessment. For example, there is a USTP. Before mo makasulod sa USTP, we have our exam. And we have the selection committee. Like, i-base nila sa kana required nga grade before mo makasulod. So, we can say na makasulod mo dayon or maka-enroll mo dayon ani nga school nga nagnay bakiray. Walay bakiray because natay exam and natay selection nga gitawag. The decisions are made not by classroom teachers only, but mga specialists. For example, guidance counselors, administrators, or selection committees sa school. Example, college or university entrance exam. Katong gingan ganiha. Choosing a school representative for a national quiz bee. Unsa pa na dira representative for the schools division, readathon, or whatsoever, mo na gitawag og selection. Kung mayon sa tawag placement, it is made after a student has been admitted to the school. So meaning nakasulod na sa school, na-accept na sa school ang bata. So it involves the process of identifying students who need remediation or may be recommended for enrichment program of the school. Sa example, a diagnostic test on English and math were given to freshmen to determine who among them may encounter difficulty in these areas. Why? Because those who will get a below average scores will be included in the remediation program. So, na-remediation program ang school na sila buhatan ng action para makater nila itong mga students nga hina adto nga area. So, that is called as placement. Next is guidance and counseling. Unsay na sa guidance and counseling? Why are these included in the decision, educational decision? So, sa guidance and counseling class, it utilizes test data to assist students in making their proposal choices for future career. Di ba natay ka nang gitawag nga career guidance week or unsa gitong na sila NCAE. Yes, that is the NCAE. Ginakandak na siya when we were in high school so that ma-identify nato unsay atong possible nga future nato nga kanang profession or matagantang idea kung sa atong kinahanglan i-take sa college. Now, when it came to my NCAE before, teaching or education is not really on the list. Like, my first choice should be a religious leader. Second is to be in the criminology sector. And third is parang all about gardening and such. But then, we can say na most of the students are really looking into the result of their NCAE para matabangan sila o kanang decide kung sa ilang kuhaan someday. So, of course, the guidance and counseling utilizes test data to assess students in making their proposal choices for future career. Ang example lagi is motong NCAE helps to identify which career path sa inyo kinahanglan i-pursue nga mag-match sa inyong interest and skills. Academic ba na siya, vocational or technical programs. So that's it. Next is program or curriculum. Now we are talking about greater na no. It is made not at the level of teachers but on higher level na siya, like sa division, regional or national, because based on the result of assessment and evaluation, we will be talking if mag-revise ba ta sa curriculum, mag-replace ba ta, or i-delete na to, i-omit na to ang some parts ato nga curriculum kay dili siya effective sa ato ang nakita. The example is the decision to implement the K-12 curriculum is to avoid mismatch among graduates and the industry. Kay nakakuan manggod, nakapan, kay umato sila sa mga neighboring countries sa Philippines, they will have this, dili sila ma-accept agad-agad because they still have to be trained for at least 2 years. And they mostly, these people are not accepted kay kulang palagi daw. That's why the government have this K-12 curriculum so that the students would find it easier na mga apply og trabaho sa ibang bansa. Next is administrative. That is administrative. When we say administrative, the word admin, it involves determining the implications to resources, including financial consideration, in order to improve the student learning as a result of assessment. So sa ikuanan nila, mga instructional materials, mga books that has to be raised to the level of the student's performance. For example, to conduct a remediation class, additional budget is necessary for the logistics, like sa classroom, sa IM, sa mga books na ginagamit, sa assessment materials, and also the additional pay for the teachers that will handle the remedial class. And that decision should come from the administrative. So those are the different education that should be kept in mind, no? Nga atong kinahanglan timan-an para easier for us to have this assessment inside our classroom. So we have the instructional, the grading, diagnostic, selection, placement, guidance and counseling, program or evaluation, and administrative. So those are kinahanglan ninyo dyan matimanan, ha? So if you have questions about the different decisions, educational decisions, please don't hesitate to ask. For our next topic is about the outcome-based assessment or the OBE. Si OBE, kanang na-appeal na siya sa 21st century and applied na sugod pa sa una. Sa una man god, we're talking about traditional way of assessment. Pero karon, is we are taking into account that teachers who have set clear targets for their lessons are or will be guided accordingly as they deliver their lessons. So mana siya nga kinahanglan ta og mas maayo or deeper understanding kung mayon taog outcome-based education. So OBE or outcome-based education, kani siya gina-kuan po ni siya gina-apply sa high school o kanang elementary. And of course sa ato ang kaning gitawag og sa tertiary. So outcome-based education or outcome-based assessment. All assessments and evaluation activities must be founded on the identified students' ILO. So munang natay course outcomes sa ato ang syllabus na sa intended learning outcomes because these ILOs should be identified and clarified so that you students will have an activity that is effective or will have an effective teaching learning process. No? So first is we have the student learning outcome. So nasa student learning outcome. Sa student learning outcome, it is the totality of accumulated knowledge, skills, and attitudes. Kung may tag student learning outcomes, we are talking all about your knowledge and your skills. And of course, your attitude during sa ato ang discussions, during sa ato ang klase. And of course, these serve as basis for assessing the extent sa ato ang OBE, no? Outcome-based. For example, the teacher is giving you an activity like a role play or sa ato ang cooking. Okay, my apologies. The screen sharing is paused, so here. So that's it. Si OBE, we are talking about the outcome-based. We are basing our assessment on the possible outcome. So dapat dili ta magstay lang sa cognitive sa itong mga students. Dapat na siya ginatest na to atong gitawag nga outcomes or ang ilang performance. It is continuously done during the entire teaching and learning process. So it is to ensure also that the students' activities are aligned with the ILOs or these expected outcomes or the objectives given by the teacher. So kung yung pa-activity or yung mga objectives is to let the students prepare bakery products, dapat yung activity tanan is to prepare the bakery products. That is to test if the students are very good in preparing bakery products, and those activities can be considered as outcome-based assessment. Okay, next is the sources of student effective learning outcome. What are the different sources of expected learning outcome? So there are several factors that need to be considered in defining the outcomes. To ensure that need to be considered in defining the outcomes, and of course, to ensure that these are aligned with the set of directions given sa atong program, given sa atong syllabus. So first and foremost, unsay mga sources sa student expected, these are the mission statement of the school. Diba? Dili na ito mahibawan og unsay type sa students na kinahanglan na ito i-produce. Or unsay mission dahil sa school para kaniya itong buhaton sa atong assessment and sa atong activities. Second one are the mandated policies on competencies and standards issued by government education agencies. Next is competencies expected by different professions, development plan and goals, as well as the current thrusts of both the national and local governments, current global trends and development so that graduates can compete globally. And of course, the general 21st century skills, focusing on the following. Unsa yung ilang i-focus sa 21st century skills? Oral and written communication, the quantitative reasoning ability, the analyzing, synthesizing, and developing creative solutions, the use of technology, and the use of or being literate sa information. Those are the different sources of student expected learning outcomes. Based sa mission sa school, mandated policies, sa competencies, development plans, sa current global trends, sa 21st century skills. And also, we have the good characteristics of good learning outcomes. So sa ito mga characteristics sa good learning outcomes. Good learning outcomes give emphasis to the application and integration of knowledge and skills. Manang kinahanglan, kabalutan mo choose of words sa to ang objectives and sa to ang intended learning outcomes. So dapat is very specific and use verbs. So kung magamit gani ka or magama kag lesson plan, dapat ang imong mga words ang gina-use there are very specific. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay. Okay. So kani siya, these are the bases para magama taog ka ng good learning outcome. So we have the first one, very specific and use of verbs that makes expectations clear. So kinahanglan nga ato ang intended learning outcomes masabtan sa atong mga estudyante. Focus on the learner. Dapat dili kay atong kagalingon atong ginahuna, dapat atong mga students dapat na sila ma-learn and dapat sila ang mag-learn, no? Or sila ang maka-learn after sa lesson. Well, maka-learn ta from them, but the focus here is you have to let them attain and achieve the outcomes we are giving. Dapat guys, ang ato ang ato ang intended learning outcomes, ang ato ang objectives are realistic. Dapat dili siya dili ako na to mga students, pero di ba siguro ni matinuod, ma'am? Kay murag layo ra jud kay siya sa tinuod, ma'am. Ay mo gihatag na mo saan man nila mo activity na nga na. So ang tendency nabagsak ang mga student. All passing students should be able to demonstrate the knowledge or the skills nga gusto nimo i-describe sa imong LO, and of course ug unsa imong gusto nga ilaang makamit after sa imong discussions. Next is dapat ang imo outcomes ga-focus on the application and integration of acquired knowledge and skills. So unsa to gi-acquire nga knowledge and skills? Unsa sila pag-apply, dapat dito ga-focus ang imong outcomes. And of course, good learning outcomes prepare the students for assessment. Dapat lang kay dili ara sa present, but of course ga-focus siya sa future. So kung i-assess nimo sila next week, na sila matubag, na sila ma-answer, na sila mabuhat, because your objectives or outcomes are preparing them for the major assessment. Offer a timeline for completion of the desired learning. So mo to sila ang atuang kuan, ang atuang dapat timan-an, no? I-consider nato in making our outcome. So the following activity is activity 3, because the second topic na to siya activity 2, and you will pass this in isahan na lang. So in our third activity, you have to choose any subject or course that you're interested in. Science ba na siya, or math, Filipino, TLE. List na siya, guys. List all the topics from the subject that you have already covered in class. For example, you have or you take note about Filipino. So sa mga topics nga inyong gi-discuss sa Filipino before, you have to list them. You have to write down the topics you want to remember nga nagian ninyo, and you can only choose at least 2 or only 2 topics from your list. Choose only 2 topics from your list, and from each of the topic you choose, write 2 student learning outcomes. So kada topic kayo mong na-choose, magama ka og 2 student learning outcomes. Mura na siyang objectives inyong gamon. For example ang imong topic na napili sa TLE is about bakery products. Sa imong subject or course, kuan siya, TLE, or bread and pastry production. Unsay topic kay mong gi-choose? Bakery products and pastry products. So sa topic 1, ibutang nila mo dire bakery products. Then gamaan nimo siya og student learning outcomes. So at the end of the lesson, the student should be able to discuss the different pastry products. Tapos sa ikaduha, the student should be able to na naman ni student should be able, so diretso na mo nga verb ang ibutang dire. Verb na. The student should be able to prepare different pastry products. Ingana. So we are using here, We are using cognitive on the SLO1 and we are using psychomotor on the SLO2. So dapat mag-search mo objectives or verbs from the Bloom's taxonomy nga objectives. Natay cognitive dito. Yes, you can go there para makakita mo mga objectives nga measurable. So guys, dili siya pwede nga gamiton niyo ang to understand, to know, to learn sa atong SLO or student learning outcomes because dili siya applicable kay dili siya ma-measure sa teacher. Okay, nasabtan ninyo? So dapat mo follow ta sa directions. If you have questions, you're free to ask me. That is your activity 3. Now let's go back sa activity 2 so that I can explain. So activity 2, this is a situation analysis. You will be analyzing a situation rather in relation to what were discussed about instructional decision and assessment, giving the following situations, what necessary assessment actions must be done. Come up with a sound solution, decision, or set of actions. So, gamitin ninyo nga template below. Don't worry, kaya ako mong provide ng assessment template para mas dali mo maka-answer. So, preparation of detailed lesson plan for the next grading period. Unsay assessment action. Situation 2, learning targets for the next topic that will be taught. Unsay assessment action. Situation 3, situation 4. So, asa mo mag-base ani sa ato ang previous discussion. Kani nga mga topics sa atong previous discussion. Okay? So, kani sila diri mo mag-base sa assessment inside the classroom. Unsa to siya nga category sa assessment and assessment action. And yes, that's it. Situation 4 taman. Ako ra ning hatag nga activity. So I hope that you have understood about the characteristics of assessment. Medyo taas-taas siya nga topic because it covers our 2 days nga pag-meet karon nga week. So we are talking about 21st century assessment. And yes, kinahanglan nato ni siya may bawaan para mahimot ang effective and efficient teacher someday. So, congratulations for finishing this module 1, our chapter 1 module, week 2. Since last week, we have an orientation. And please don't forget to answer your activities. Isahan ang pagpasa to kay isumpay na ko siya sa isa ka document. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a nice day ahead.